In the Maplewood district of suburban Pennsylvania, spring was in the air. The Watson family's two-story house stood peacefully on a quiet street where young leaves trembled in the breeze. Caroline Watson gazed out the kitchen window and took a deep breath. She felt her heart leap at the familiar spring scent that hadn't changed since her childhood. She took pride in maintaining a good balance between work and family after 12 years as a loan officer at the local First National Bank. "Mom, look." 8-year-old Emma came running in with a handful of wildflowers she had picked in the garden. Her small hands clutched delicate blooms that could easily be mistaken for weeds. "They're lovely, Emma," Caroline smiled, pouring water into a vase. "Dad will be so happy when he gets home." "When is Dad coming home?" Emma asked, tilting her head. A hint of sadness appeared in her brown eyes. "In 2 more days. He'll be back as soon as his meeting in Chicago is over." Her husband Robert, a sales manager at Nova Medical Pharmaceuticals, traveled once a month. His responsibilities at work had increased, making him busier than before. While Caroline was proud of her husband's work, she felt sad that their family time had decreased. "Do you remember the secret handshake with Dad?" Emma suddenly asked in a bright voice. Caroline smiled. It was a small ritual between father and daughter. The secret handshake, consisting of complicated steps and finger movements, symbolized their special bond. Every time Robert returned from a business trip, the two performed this ritual at the front door. "Of course, Dad hasn't forgotten either," Caroline answered, gently stroking her daughter's head. "Now, let's get dinner ready." After dinner, Caroline tucked Emma into bed and returned to the living room to open her work files. She had loan reviews scheduled for tomorrow morning. Looking outside, she saw the lights go out in the house across the street, and silence enveloped the neighborhood. She checked a brief message from Robert. "Today's meeting ran long. More important business talks tomorrow. Love to everyone." She could sense fatigue in his concise words. Caroline sighed deeply. Recently, her husband seemed different somehow. He used to call, but for the past few weeks, he'd only sent messages. He made excuses about being too busy, but his voice lacked its usual warmth. "I'm overthinking things," she told herself. "He's just really busy." At breakfast, Emma suddenly asked a question while talking about school news. "Mom, can I stay at Jenny's house?" Caroline considered while sipping her coffee. "When?" "Tomorrow night. There's a sleepover." Caroline hesitated a bit. Yesterday, she'd received a neighborhood safety alert about a suspicious person sighting. "I'm sorry, Emma. Not this week. There have been reports of suspicious people in the neighborhood. Next week would be fine." Emma looked disappointed but quickly said, "I understand." She was a remarkably understanding child, sometimes with a sensitivity that allowed her to perceive even adult concerns. That night, Robert called for the first time in a while. "Caroline, the meetings will be over tomorrow. I'll be home the day after tomorrow in the evening as planned." "That's good. Emma is looking forward to seeing you." "How is she?" "School." "She's fine. She was very happy when I told her you'd be coming home." At the end of the call, Robert paused briefly and said, "Caroline, I have something to talk to you about when I get back." Caroline felt a tightness in her chest. "What? Is something wrong?" "I can't talk about it over the phone." "Don't worry, it's nothing bad. See you soon." After hanging up, Caroline stood by the window, gazing at the dark street. She couldn't suppress her mixed feelings of anxiety and anticipation. For the first time in 12 years of marriage, she suspected that something might be hidden behind her husband's words. She peeked into Emma's bedroom to find her daughter sleeping peacefully. Streetlight filtered through the window, softly reflecting off her brown hair. Caroline quietly closed the door. The next day, Robert called. I can come back today instead of tomorrow. The meeting ended early. I'll be home by evening. Caroline left work early and hurriedly tidied up the living room. The doorbell rang sooner than expected, making her heart race. When she opened the door, Robert stood there in his suit. "I'm home," he smiled gently and embraced Caroline. She felt reassured by his warmth and scent, yet something felt odd. It wasn't his usual strong embrace but seemed somewhat hesitant. "I'm glad you could come home early," Caroline answered with a smile. "Emma will be home from school soon." Robert entered the living room and sank deeply into the sofa. He closed his eyes with a tired expression and murmured, "It was a long meeting." Normally, he would start talking about the details of his trip and the people he met, but today he remained silent. "I'll get you something to drink," Caroline said as she headed to the kitchen. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the lemonade from the refrigerator. "What did you want to talk about?" she asked. Robert suddenly straightened his posture. "Oh, that, let's talk about it later. I just want to rest now." The front door opened, and Emma's cheerful voice rang out. "I'm home." She burst into the living room and her eyes lit up when she saw her father. "Dad." "Hey, Princess," Robert stood up and spread his arms toward Emma. However, there was a hint of tension in his voice.
"Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious."
Emma ran to her father but stopped just before hugging him. Her expression subtly changed, and she tilted her head slightly. "Dad, let's do our secret handshake." "Oh, of course," Robert looked confused. As Emma began the special movements, he awkwardly tried to mimic them. But he made mistakes in the procedure and froze while holding Emma's hand. "Dad, that's not right," Emma frowned. "It goes like this, remember." She demonstrated the movements again, but Robert appeared flustered. "Sorry, Princess. I'm tired. I'll do it properly later," he made an excuse and quickly patted her head. In the kitchen, while preparing dinner, Emma tugged at Caroline's sleeve. "Mom, Dad's different," she whispered. "Emma, don't say things like that." "Dad's just tired," Caroline replied, though inwardly she felt the same way. During dinner, Robert barely ate, making excuses about an upset stomach. The conversation was unnaturally fragmented. He occasionally checked his smartphone and appeared to tense up several times. "How was Chicago?" Caroline casually asked. "Same as usual," Robert answered briefly, without going into details. "Sorry, I'm really tired. I'm going to bed early." Caroline frowned as she watched him climb the stairs. After finishing cleaning up with Emma, she put her daughter to bed and quietly peeked into the master bedroom. Robert was already asleep. Caroline returned to the living room and noticed her husband's suitcase. It was neatly placed as usual, but she realized his laptop was missing. He always brought his laptop on business trips and kept it with him after returning home. He had explained it contained confidential company information. Waking up in the middle of the night, Caroline noticed the bed beside her was empty. She heard faint voices from downstairs. She quietly descended the stairs and peeked into the living room. Robert stood with his back turned, speaking quietly on the phone. "I'll handle it tomorrow morning." "Yes, she doesn't know anything." "No, it's fine." Caroline held her breath and quietly went back upstairs to bed. Her heart was filled with confusion and fear. Who were you talking to? What are you hiding? In the morning, Robert woke up early and was hurriedly getting dressed. "Where are you going?" Caroline asked. "I'm going to the office to pick up something I forgot," he answered. "I left some important documents there." "Where's your laptop?" Caroline deliberately asked. Robert's movements froze for a moment. "Oh, I left it at the office. I'm going to pick it up this morning." "But you always." I'm in a hurry, we'll talk later, he said, giving Caroline a quick kiss before leaving. When Emma woke up, she seemed a little disappointed that her father wasn't there. Did Dad leave again? He just went to the office. He'll be back soon, Caroline answered, though she wasn't certain. After breakfast, Caroline called the bank and took time off for family matters. Her boss Martha seemed surprised since Caroline wasn't the type to take time off, but she said, "That's fine, take care." Around noon, Caroline's cell phone rang. It was from Robert. "Caroline, I'll be home this evening," his voice sounded cheerful. Caroline was confused. "What are you talking about? You've already come home." There was silence on the other end of the phone. "What?" "No, I'm still in Chicago. The meeting will end this afternoon. I'll head straight to the airport from here." Caroline felt the blood drain from her face. "Robert." Her voice trembled. "Someone was pretending to be you at our house this morning." "What are you talking about? Is this a joke?" Robert's voice became serious. After hanging up, Caroline hugged Emma. "Emma, you don't have to go to school. Let's stay together today." "What's wrong, Mom?" Emma seemed to sense her mother's anxiety. Interrupting Caroline's response, there was a knock at the front door. "Emma, it's Dad," a voice that was unmistakably Robert's came from behind the door. However, there was an unnatural sweetness in its tone. Caroline's entire body froze. Robert had just told her on the phone that he was still in Chicago. So whoever was now behind the door. Suddenly, Emma gripped her mother's arm tightly. Her small face had turned pale with fear. "Mom, that's not Dad," Emma whispered in a trembling voice. "Let's run away." Caroline looked into her daughter's eyes. Her daughter's intuition had proven right many times before. She made an instant decision. "Shoo," she put her finger to her lips and took Emma's hand. The two quietly moved to the kitchen. "Caroline, open up," the voice behind the door changed to a slightly irritated tone. "It's cold." Caroline opened the pantry door and pushed Emma in first. The vertical storage space had several shelves lined with cans, dry goods, and seasonings. She also entered and gently closed the door from the inside. Inside the pantry it was dim, but some light leaked through the gap in the door. Caroline took out her cell phone and tried to call 911. However, the signal was weak, and the "emergency call in progress" display kept flashing. "Mom, I'm scared," Emma said in a small voice. "It's okay," Caroline whispered back. "I'm calling the police. Stay quiet." Outside, she heard the front door open. Caroline held her breath. The door should have been locked. But then she remembered, this morning, when the fake Robert left, he had the key. He had gone somewhere with the house key and had now returned. "Emma, where are you?" "It's Dad," a syrupy voice echoed through the house. Footsteps approached from the living room to the dining room, and then to the kitchen. Emma clutched Caroline's clothes tightly, trembling. Caroline could feel her own heartbeat pounding loudly in her ears. Through the gap in the pantry door, she saw a figure enter the kitchen. It was indeed Robert's appearance, same build, same hairstyle, same clothes. But his expression had a coldness unlike her husband's. Most terrifyingly, he held a large kitchen knife in his right hand. "Are we playing hide and seek?" the man said in a sweet voice as he began looking around the kitchen. "Come out, it's family time." Caroline checked her phone again. The emergency call was still processing. She began typing a text message to her neighbor Barbara, asking for help, but the message remained sending and didn't move. Suddenly, Caroline's phone began to ring. A loud melody broke the silence. "Well, found you," the man's voice suddenly darkened. Slow footsteps approached the pantry. Caroline hurriedly hung up the phone. But it was too late. The man who resembled Robert was already standing in front of the pantry door. His shadow blocked the light coming through the gap in the door. "Found you," he said in a low voice. The doorknob slowly began to turn. Caroline hugged Emma and backed into the rear of the pantry. "Who are you? What do you want?" she cried in a trembling voice. "Caroline, don't you recognize me?" The man's voice changed again, now taking on a hurt tone. "I'm Robert, your husband." "That's a lie. Robert is in Chicago right now. I just spoke to him on the phone." As the pantry door began to open, Caroline pushed Emma behind her. "What do you want?" "Money. The jewelry is in the bedroom upstairs." "It's not you I want," the man said coldly. "You're in the way." His words froze Caroline's blood. At that very moment, Emma whispered in a small voice, "Mom, the window." Yes, there was a small window at the back of the pantry. She had opened it before for ventilation. Caroline quickly directed Emma toward the window. It was small, but large enough for an 8-year-old girl to pass through. "Open it," she urged. Emma unlocked the window and pushed it up with all her might. Cold outside air flowed in. Trying to escape, the man's voice suddenly became harsh. The pantry door was now half open. "I won't allow that." Caroline lifted Emma toward the window. "Hurry. Once you're outside, go to Barbara's house." Emma pushed her small body through the window. After confirming that her daughter had safely reached the ground, Caroline tried to follow. However, her body was larger than Emma's and got caught in the window frame. "Don't come any closer." Caroline turned around and shouted at the man who had now half entered the pantry. "I won't let you go," the man said, fully entering the pantry. The knife in his hand gleamed ominously. "You both should be here." Caroline desperately pushed herself out and finally managed to exit through the window. Once outside, she immediately stood up, took Emma's hand, and started running. "Mom!" Emma suddenly stopped and looked back. When Caroline turned around, she saw the man trying to come out through the window. However, his build was too large for the window. He was shouting something in an irritated voice, but the words were inaudible. At that moment, a strange smell wafted from inside the house. It was a strong odor like kerosene. "If you won't come out, I'll burn it all down," the man's voice came through the window. "We can all end together." Caroline's fear peaked. "Emma, hurry." They ran toward the neighboring house. Barbara Simmons was a retired elementary school teacher and a longtime friend. When they desperately knocked on her door, it opened immediately. "Caroline?" "Emma? What's wrong?" Barbara's face showed surprise. "Help us. Someone broke into our house. He's trying to set it on fire," Caroline said, breathless. Barbara pulled them inside and quickly locked the door. "I'll call the police," she said, hurriedly picking up the phone. Caroline and Emma looked at their house from the window. Smoke was beginning to appear faintly. "Mom, the house is..." Emma's voice sounded like she was about to cry. Caroline hugged her daughter. "It's okay. We're safe. That's what matters." Barbara put down the phone. "The police and fire trucks will be here right away," she placed her hand on Caroline's shoulder. "What on earth is happening?" Caroline's head was still full of confusion and fear. "Someone, pretending to be Robert." She stumbled over her words. At that moment, her cell phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. Caroline answered with a trembling hand. "Caroline. Are you all right?" Her husband's voice was clearly agitated. It was the real Robert's voice. "Robert," she said in a voice that was about to cry. "We're safe. But the house. I contacted the police. I'm heading to the airport now. I'll be back as soon as possible," Robert's voice was serious. Who was that person? What's happening? I don't know. Caroline answered. But he looked just like you. Caroline, Emma, and Barbara gazed out the window. Smoke was rising from the Montgomery house. The sirens of police cars and fire trucks approached, and the area in front of the Montgomery house was quickly filled with emergency vehicles. Firefighters promptly began spraying water, and police officers cordoned off the area. Caroline and Emma silently watched everything from the window of Barbara's house. "Ma'am, may I speak with you?" A uniformed female police officer visited Barbara's house. Caroline nodded and tightly held Emma's hand. "I'm Detective Moreno." "I understand you've had a terrible experience," she said in a calm voice. "Could you tell me as much detail as possible?" Caroline explained the sequence of events to the officer in a trembling voice, from her husband's business trip to his sudden return, her daughter's sense that something was wrong, and finally the phone call from her real husband. "Did this perpetrator really look like your husband?" Detective Moreno asked. "Yes, at a glance, they were indistinguishable," Caroline answered. "But something was different, the way he moved, talked, especially the fact that he couldn't remember the secret handshake." Detective Moreno smiled gently at Emma. "Emma, you noticed well. How did you know that person wasn't your dad?" Emma looked up at her mother, and when Caroline nodded encouragingly, she answered in a small voice, "Dad's eyes were different. They were cold. And..." She thought for a moment and continued, "He didn't know our secret handshake. Dad would never forget that." Detective Moreno nodded while taking notes. "That's very sharp observation." At that moment, another officer entered the room. "Detective Moreno, we found something in the house." Inside the plastic bag the officer handed over was a charred smartphone. It was found near the source of the fire. There are traces of apps. It appears to be a voice conversion app. "Voice conversion?" Caroline murmured. "Yes, an app that can convert your voice to sound like someone else's," Detective Moreno explained. "With high-performance ones, if you have recorded voice samples, you can mimic a voice in real time. The perpetrator must have recorded your husband's voice." Recent memories of Robert's behavior flashed through Caroline's mind. How he had begun to prefer messages over phone calls. Brief replies. Were all these attempts to make it difficult to collect voice samples? "Mr. Robert Watson will arrive soon," another officer reported. "He's returning on an emergency flight from Chicago." Late that night, Robert arrived at Barbara's house with an exhausted expression. Upon seeing her husband, Caroline burst into tears and embraced him. Emma also ran to her father, and the three hugged for a long time. "What's going on?" Robert finally spoke. "Who was impersonating me?" Detective Moreno briefly explained the situation to Robert. "Mr. Watson, have you felt like you were being stalked recently? Anyone who might be fixated on you?" Robert's face turned pale. "Actually." He exhaled deeply. "I've been concerned about something lately. I've had the feeling of being watched." "Why didn't you tell me?" Caroline grabbed her husband's arm and asked. "I didn't want to worry you," Robert answered apologetically. "I thought it was just my imagination. And the spare key to our house was stolen from my company locker. I noticed last week." Robert held his head. "I reported it to security, but since there were no other incidents, it wasn't treated as a big deal." The next morning, there was a call from Detective Moreno. The police investigation had found clues to the perpetrator through phone records and surveillance camera footage. "Does the name Jessica Morris mean anything to you?" Detective Moreno asked Robert. Robert's expression hardened. "Jessica, she's a colleague at my company. She's in the marketing department." "What's your relationship with her?" "Just colleagues," Robert answered immediately. "Sometimes we work together on projects. She has called your number many times. Particularly frequently in recent days, Detective Moreno calmly pointed out. Caroline looked at Robert. There was no lie in his eyes. She invited me to dinner several times, Robert spoke with difficulty. Of course I declined. At first, I thought it was a joke, but she became increasingly persistent. Last month, I clearly expressed my refusal. Why didn't you tell me? Caroline's voice held more sadness than anger. I thought it was just workplace trouble, Robert made excuses. And I was embarrassed. Later that afternoon, there was further communication from the police. Jessica Morris had been captured on the company's security cameras and arrested. Photos of Robert, personal information, and notes recording the family's daily routine were found at her home. She has confessed to some of it during questioning, Detective Moreno reported. She seems to have believed she had a relationship with you and was trying to eliminate your family. Eliminate. Caroline's voice trembled. It appears she planned to kill you and take Emma away, Detective Moreno said gravely. In her delusion, she thought she could become Emma's real mother. Caroline and Robert were speechless. Emma was playing in another room at Barbara's house, so she didn't hear this conversation. We are requesting a psychological evaluation, Detective Moreno continued. She clearly shows symptoms of delusional disorder. Before leaving, Detective Moreno stopped by the room where Emma was. Emma, thanks to your courage and intuition, you were able to escape safely with your mother. That's truly remarkable. Emma showed a proud smile, though a little embarrassed. After Detective Moreno left, the three family members sat on the sofa in Barbara's living room. We'll be staying at a hotel temporarily, Caroline gently explained. Until the house is repaired. And we'll install a new security system, Robert added. To make sure this never happens again. Emma looked up at her parents. Dad, don't forget our secret handshake again. Robert drew his daughter close. I'll never forget, Princess. I don't know what would have happened without you. From now on, we won't keep secrets from each other no matter what. Caroline took Robert's hand. He nodded and squeezed his wife's hand tightly in return. I promise, he vowed. Detective Moreno told Caroline and Robert, who had met her in the hotel lobby, Jessica Morris will undergo a psychiatric evaluation. 2 weeks after the incident, the Watson family was temporarily living in a luxury hotel suite. The house repairs were progressing well, and the installation of the new security system had been completed. What were the results of the evaluation? Caroline quietly asked. She was diagnosed with delusional disorder, Detective Moreno answered. She needs long-term treatment. Robert clutched his coffee cup. Can I speak with her family? Caroline looked at Robert with a surprised face. Her husband, sensing her question, explained. I want to understand what happened, why things turned out this way. A few days later, Robert met with Jessica's sister, Marion. Marion spoke with a tired expression. Jessica has exhibited similar behavior before. But she has refused treatment. Why me? Robert struggled for words. You were probably the ideal person for her, Marion explained sadly. My sister had lost the ability to distinguish between reality and delusion. That night, returning to the hotel, Robert told Caroline everything. She's going to receive treatment. Marion promised to visit regularly and support her recovery. You're kind, Caroline smiled. But don't ever keep things from me again out of concern for worrying me. I promise, Robert answered with a serious expression. Families should share everything. 3 months after the incident, the Watson family returned to their repaired house. The furniture was new, the walls repainted, and all traces of that terrible event had completely disappeared. However, in the family's hearts, the experience of that day had taken root as a new bond. Caroline joined the local safety committee and began hosting home security seminars using her own experience. A real family protects and trusts each other. That trust saved our lives, she said. Weekend brunch became a new family tradition. Robert no longer prioritized business trips and came to value time with his family. And Emma's secret handshake became a family affair, a special ritual exchanged by all three when leaving in the morning and before bedtime. On Emma's 9th birthday, she won a school essay contest with the theme, My Family. Even when scary things happen, we can overcome them if our family is together. I love Mom who believed in my intuition and Dad who protected us, she wrote, moving the audience to tears. On the way home, Emma walked holding her parents' hands firmly. The evening in Maplewood District flowed with the same peaceful time as always. However, for the Watson family, the preciousness of that ordinary daily life had taken on a more vivid brilliance after that terrifying experience. As Caroline gently stroked her daughter's hair, she thought about how a nightmarish event had, conversely, deepened their family bonds. And now, a new chapter of life filled with trust and love was unfolding before them.